Hey, welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you are a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here and submit your question for a future episode. Got some good questions this week? Let's talk about it. Hello, I'm often known as someone who cries very easily, and this usually happens when I have to speak from the heart or when I see members of the congregation participating and engaging in musical worship. I do not like this about myself, as it holds me back from speaking points during transitions. How important is it to keep control over emotions when leading worship, and how does one go about doing that? Thank you. I feel like this question exists on a very fine line. Some people would be like, no emotion, never show emotion, you are there to lead your people. Other people are like, be emotional, be as emotional as you want. Like, that's why we're there. We're supposed to be there worshiping God. And if you don't have emotions in your worshiping of God, are you really worshiping God? And I want to try to fall in between, somewhere in between. I'm not even sure where on the spectrum. I'll probably, knowing my personality, I'll lean more towards the don't cry. But I want to be mindful that emotions in worship are okay. In fact, we need emotions. John Piper talks about how worship is like a treasuring of God in your hearts. I've kind of adapted his definition of worship for my own, but essentially it's like knowing and treasuring God in our hearts. It's not just the knowledge, so we aren't just there to share facts from the Bible, but that fact from the Bible, whatever it is, that truth about God should stir our hearts to feel something. And I want you to notice the order there. It's not just emotion. There is truth first. John Piper says we must know God and then treasure him. And then I think he says show his glory or something along those lines. But it starts with a right knowledge of God. So there's our knowledge part. But then that knowledge overflows into, okay, this is how it applies to my life. This is what it means for me. And I'm going to feel that truth. I'm going to understand what it means for me. And so we want to be mindful of that as well. Now, here's the other thing that we need to consider when answering this question. And that is, and I've talked about this plenty of times on my channel before, so hopefully it's not a surprise to you. When we are leading a church gathering, we have a responsibility not just to model what worship looks like. If we were just going to model what worship looks like, which I'm not saying that we don't do that, but if that's all that we did, then it would be okay to just be up there and cry our eyes out on Sunday morning, and somebody would look at us and say, look how much they love God. And that might be completely true in that situation. But you don't just have a responsibility to model worship. You have a responsibility to lead worship. You have to be able to be contained enough within yourself. Not, once again, listen to the balance I talked about before. Don't view the statement just in this one single sentence I'm about to say. You have to be able to contain yourself enough where you realize it's not just about me worshiping, but I am leading the people in front of me. And if my emotions keep me frequently from leading the people in front of me in the way that I need to lead them, and maybe the way that you need to lead them is you need to be emotional for a moment and let them see how you feel about God, but that's probably not 100% of the time. If those emotions are getting in the way of you leading your church in an appropriate way, then I think you need to rein your emotions in. And I know some people won't like that, but once again, hear it within the context of the whole answer that I just gave, all right? Knowledge is good. Leading our church is good. Emotions are good as well. I've been reading a biography of Spurgeon with my staff at church. We're reading it together as a staff. And we just read one of the prayers that he led during his service. And it was like the most emotional prayer that I've ever heard. It was like crazy. I wish I don't have the book in front of me right now, but trust me, it was an emotional prayer. And I just imagined Spurgeon up there like, oh God, would you save us sinners? And like tears streaming down his face. I don't know if they actually were or not, but even in his emotion, he was able to appropriately lead his church. And I think that's the balance you need to find. Yes, we can be emotional. I should probably be more emotional in my leading, not just emotional for the sake of being emotional, but like letting the truths that I talk about stir my heart and lead me in a response, in a proper response of emotion to God. But I don't want to be crying every week and getting choked up so much so that it hinders my ability to lead others in worship. Now, to answer your last part of the question, you say, how does one go about doing that? How does one go about keeping their emotions in check? And I think maybe you just need to think about, once again, it's like I can have these truths hit me, but I need to understand that I'm still leading the people in front of me. So if those emotions serve to lead the people in front of me, let it flow. If they don't, it's not just about me during corporate worship. That's why it's called corporate worship. It's about the body worshiping together. All things must be done to build up the body. Can you losing it on stage be done to build up the body? Every once in a while, probably, but probably not every Sunday. I'm not looking for a worship leader who cries on stage every Sunday. So I would keep that balance in mind. Maybe part of the reason you're emotional is because some people do that because they're nervous. To be honest, they're not used to talking in front of people. So maybe it's just a nervousness thing for you, and you already have these emotions of nervousness, laying on you heavy whenever you're leading, and then you add more emotions on top of that about some special truth about God that you cherish, and then it just overflows. So maybe it's nervousness. I think the other thing that I've seen sometimes is like if we don't plan these moments out in advance, then we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants and something hits us in the moment. And I'm not saying that that can never happen. Sometimes I switch my speaking transitions up during the service, but I always have a plan in advance. And so think about these things in advance, cherish them in your heart throughout the week, process them on your own time, weep over them in your private worship. And then whenever you show up to public worship, you could have already processed those emotions and shown up and been like, this is what I've been thinking about all week. I cherish it so deeply. Makes me joyful. It makes me love God more, and I'm going to be able to communicate it to my church well. So don't be nervous. Prepare in advance, process the emotions throughout the week, and then they probably won't come out whenever you're up in front of your church as much. Not that that's always a bad thing. I will keep giving that caveat. I've been a worship leader for 25 years, and while I've been at my current church for a year, I've only been worship director for 6 months. I inherited the team without setting up initial guidelines, though I did share key expectations, like starting rehearsal on time. One member, a talented singer, has been consistently late to rehearsals and Sunday mornings, creating ongoing issues. She shared that she's dealing with deep emotional trauma, is in therapy, and is overwhelmed by her demanding schedule. While the team ministers to her when she's struggling, her frequent lateness, emotional outbursts, and high anxiety have disrupted rehearsals and strained the group. The breaking point came when she caused a significant delay during a Sunday rehearsal and reacted with a dramatic outburst when I addressed it. I asked her to take the day off without criticism, but she exploded further, stepped down from the team, and has avoided communication since. I've made it clear she is not ready to return until she works through her personal challenges and can contribute without ongoing chaos. However, I'm facing pressure from the pastor, his wife, and the team to reinstate her, despite the disruption her behavior causes. The other team members who've enabled her behavior for years are upset with me, and I feel stuck. If I allow her back, I risk ongoing chaos. If I hold my ground, it strains my relationships with the team. I'm solid in my decision, but deeply discouraged and unsure how to move forward. Any advice? That's a tough one because, first of all, I feel like I don't know exactly how you had the conversation, and maybe you think that the conversation with her, maybe it wasn't even a conversation because you just kind of sounded like you were like, you're not on the team anymore, but I don't know if that's how it went down or not. It sounds like, in my mind, you made the right decision. Like, I don't know all the variables of the situation. I was just talking about with my pastor, not a situation exactly like this. The thing we landed on was people have different things going on in their lives, but the baseline expectations for what it means to be on the worship team can't change just because somebody has something going on in their lives. And when I say that, there are things that we show grace towards people in certain seasons of their life when they're going to be on the worship team. We show grace to them in those things, but there are also fundamental things of what it means to exist and function in a healthy way on a worship team that must be met, and it doesn't matter what the circumstances in your life are. If you are unable to meet those things, which you have to define what those things are for you in your worship ministry, if they're unable to meet those baseline requirements, I'm sorry, you can't be on the worship team. And I know that that sounds really harsh, but I'm not talking about everything. Like, I probably would make some concessions for people in certain areas of the worship team. But one of the non-negotiables for me in my worship ministry is you're going to be at rehearsal and you're going to be there on time. That's just a logistical expectation. If you can't show up to rehearsal on time, or if you can't show up to rehearsal at all during the week, we have weekly rehearsals, then you're not going to play on Sunday. That's an expectation. And it's not that I don't care about what's going on in your personal life, because I do. But if you can't fulfill the baseline expectations of what it means to be on the worship team, then this isn't the season of life for you to serve in the worship team. And so we do want to have grace in certain circumstances. I'll say it again. But we don't want to just say this person has a hard life and they've got a million things going on right now, so we'll just let them be on the worship team, continue to cause problems, and just deal with it just because, right? It's probably healthier at this point in time, and some people aren't going to like that I say this because I've seen this before. It's probably ultimately healthier at this point in time for somebody who's struggling to not be on the worship team. And I know some people will be like, well, you don't understand. That's like the one place that they find safety and find purpose in life. And, it's good. And we don't want to feel like we're punishing them just because they're struggling. And the thing is, I'm not punishing you. I care about you. This is for your benefit, even if they don't understand that it's for their benefit. And I don't know all of the details of this specific situation, so I'm speaking broadly here, but I do think that is a decision that we need to be prepared to make sometime and say, hey, you're working like 3 jobs right now, trying to accomplish whatever. You don't get off work until 5:45, and you have to rush over here for worship rehearsal, and you're always, 45 minutes late or whatever. Listen, I want you to have time with your family at home if you're talking to somebody who has a family. Like, this isn't healthy for you to be on the worship team and not be able to spend time with your family. Like, if you are using the worship team rehearsal in place of spending time with your family and working all of the other time, I know I've kind of gone off on a rabbit trail here with some other hypothetical situation, but then I would be like, ultimately, it's healthier for you to have a strong relationship with your family than to be able to serve on the worship team. Even if you don't see that as a pastoral response, that is the right answer, depending on the circumstance. Now, here is the part that makes it hard, is that you're like making this decision by yourself. You're the only one who feels this way. And your pastor is pressuring you. His wife is pressuring you, which seems sort of like a strange dynamic to me. I don't know. At some churches, it's like their pastor's wife. The pastor's wife is like the first lady of the church or something. The church, at least churches I would serve in, didn't hire the pastor's wife to pastor the church. So I'm not like taking, unless I respect her opinion, which in the past I've respected the pastor's wife opinion, but just because she's the pastor's wife, I don't feel pressure from her. And then you have the team as well who wants to reinstate her. So it's like you probably feel like everybody is against you, and they're like, we have got to let this person back on the team. And at that point, I mean, I have a really close relationship with my pastor, so if my pastor said that, I would honor his decision. And I would be like, okay, I hear you, but you're going to have to talk me through how this works, because I'm not seeing it right now. It seems like it's going to cause more trouble. And maybe in that conversation with my pastor, he would see maybe this isn't the best. Like, I didn't realize all this other stuff was going on. I didn't realize they were constantly late for the past 3 months and having emotional outbursts on stage during rehearsal, which is completely inappropriate. And so I think for now, like, just from what you described, honestly, If my pastor's telling me this person should be on the team, I'm not going to go against my pastor in that situation. And I'm going to figure out, ultimately, I'm going to have to figure out how to make it work, which is a whole other different question, which I don't have time to answer right now. But you must have expectations. If this person was joining on the team, again, coming back to the team, I might say, listen, we would love to have you back. These are the expectations, though. And I would tell them and work through them. And if you don't have expectations for your team, check out the Worship Team Toolkit. I'll link it down in the description below. In that, I give you my Worship Team Code of Conduct. And I would walk them through that before they join the team. I'd love to have you back on the team. Just a reminder, these are the expectations that we have for all team members. And you better be holding the other people to those expectations as well, so they can't look and be like, well, this person doesn't do this and this person doesn't do this. That's what I would do in that situation. So check out the Worship Team Toolkit, link down in the description below. Other than that, until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.